Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to basically take a big pile of information, boil it down, and give you the key takeaways.
Yeah, making complex stuff understandable.
Exactly. If you want to get a handle on things quickly without getting totally overwhelmed, you're in the right place.
And today we're diving into artificial intelligence, specifically its impact on arts and creativity.
Right. Drawing from a week 11 lecture and related discussions we looked at.
It's a fascinating area, lots of different angles.
Totally. So our mission, if you will, is to explore this relationship between AI and creative expression. We'll uncover some surprising bits, different viewpoints, get the whole picture.
Sounds good. Ready.
Let's jump in. So the lecture started with this idea of augmentation.
And it wasn't just about economics, which is where you often hear that term.
Wow.
It was more about expressivity.
Yeah, and how we're kind of already doing it. The examples were things like, Red Bull, coffee, even multivitamins.
Little ways we hack our own biology,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Tweaking our systems. And then it pivoted to something called augmented relationships.
Which, importantly, isn't augmented reality. Not about headsets.
Yeah, different concept. How did you understand that initial interpretation?
Well, the way it was put was like a conversation where maybe your assumptions get challenged. You talk, you push back, and you either find some common ground or at least, broaden your understanding.
Okay, so it's about extending understanding through dialogue.
Yeah. And the lecture proposed that AI could potentially help with that, help us relate beyond those first assumptions we make.
AI is a tool for better connection. That's optimistic.
It is. But then almost right away, the discussion brought up the flip side.
Right, that feeling some people get. Like, if you know a piece of art was made by a machine, does it lessen the connection?
It's a key question, isn't it? Because what if you don't know?
Uh-huh.
You're just experiencing the art. A song, maybe?
Yeah.
You have no idea if it's human or AI. Does it matter then?
The lecture really hammered home that context is crucial. Knowing or not knowing seems to fundamentally change how we perceive it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one perspective presented was AI as a stimulating technology. Like it could create new connections, maybe like finding alternative spaces for interaction.
Okay, so potentially good for stimulation, for sparking new ideas.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
Always.
The tension arises when you attach it to an economy, when money and jobs get involved.
Ah, right. Then it becomes potentially bad, quote unquote. And this links to Pierre Bourdieu.
Exactly. His idea that art is never neutral. It always performs some kind of function.
Like creating meaning or positioning a culture.
Or establishing how we evaluate things. It's never just art for art's sake. So AI entering this field isn't just creating stuff in a vacuum.
No, it's stepping into these existing structures, power, value, all that.
Which is a really crucial point to keep in mind.
Okay, so that sets the stage nicely for the next big theme. Machine creativity versus human creativity. The lecturer mentioned Douglas Hofstadter.
Yeah, his initial stance back in 1979. He was pretty firm then that a machine could just never achieve what he saw as the Western ideal of, music, maths, genuine thinking.
A very human-centric view.
Yeah.
But then something surprising happened.
Right. A pretty simple computer program composed music.
Yeah.
Music that sounded incredibly like Bach.
So much so that a listening panel who didn't know who composed what.
They actually mistook the AI's piece for real Bach. And not only that, they ranked it higher than a piece by a contemporary human composer in the style of Bach.
Wow. Okay, that must have been a shock.
According to the lecture, it completely changed Hofstadter's perspective. It made him question if maybe human creativity itself has, well, almost mechanical elements, rules, processes.
That's a pretty profound thought. If a program can replicate genius so convincingly, what does that imply about our own genius?
Exactly. And from there, the discussion shifted toward the market pressures on human artists today.
Right, connecting it to Marx, the piano maker versus the piano player.
Sort of, yeah. The idea was the piano maker is the entrepreneur, the player isn't. But today's big artists think Taylor Swift, Nicki Minaj, Lady Gaga, they have to be both.
They have to be the creator and the product.
They become these symbolic subject objects. Their art and their public image are kind of fused.
Selling the whole package, not just the music.
And the lecture sort of linked this back to thinking machines, suggesting maybe we humans are also caught in this cycle, this pressure to constantly upgrade ourselves to keep pace.
Like we're becoming nodes in a system. That's a bit dystopian.
It raises the question, doesn't it? Are we just becoming part of the machine?
Mm.
This then led into a really interesting historical detour.
Oh, yeah. Looking at human vocal articulation before AI.
Right. Beatboxing, obviously, since the mid-70s.
But it went much further back.
Oh, way further. Non-Western traditions,
Hmm?
like Wanwun in Kashmir. Women using these very specific, hard vocal sounds in festivals.
I hadn't heard of that.
Or in Indian classical music, the tradition of speaking rhythms, teen tal, that goes back literally thousands of years.
Thousands. Wow.
Yeah. And then you got scat singing and jazz, obviously.
Vocal improvisation.
And just, people imitating instruments with their voices happens in lots of cultures, like Disney cartoons even.
Right. So the point was, this kind of vocal sound creation isn't new at all.
Not remotely. Humans have been doing it for millennia. It really puts the novelty of AI sound creation into perspective.
It does. And the call to prayer was mentioned too.
As another ancient vocal tradition. Specific sounds, judged recitations, and critically, the need for projection over distance.
Before microphones.
Exactly. Like singers, Ethel Merman was mentioned, valued for sheer vocal power, the ability to fill a theater.
So the human voice itself has always been evolving, responding to technology and needs.
Precisely. AI is just maybe the latest stage in that transformation.
Which brings us neatly to the ethics of it all. AI in the arts.
Yeah, definitely a thorny area. The lecture made a quick distinction, good AI like for cancer treatments versus potentially bad AI, thinking about job displacement.
And AI in self-expression was put somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, kind of a gray area, lots of debate, machines replacing human creativity, that whole anxiety.
And it dug into the technical side a bit, didn't it? How AI music gets made.
It did, pointing out that a lot of the early stuff heavily relied on actual human musicians. Orchestras playing the parts.
Right. It wasn't just a machine spitting out a finished track.
No. Even that Amy Winehouse AI project from, 2016 or so, that involved significant human filtering adjusting.
And a big team.
Yeah, the number mentioned was around 90 people involved in that Winehouse project.
90. Okay, that's very different from the image of a lone AI churning out hits.
Very different from something like Suno now, which is presented as more of a single machine entity.
And this led to some critical points about who's actually building these AI tools.
Yeah, the issue of ventriloquism and ethnoforgery. Often, AI voices or avatars are presented as female, but the development teams are predominantly male. So it raises questions about perspective, about representation, whose voice is really being heard.
That's a really important point. And the idea that maybe voice tech feels more playful for men than women.
Yeah, and linking that to the history of audio technology. How microphones' filters were often designed with a male voice as the default.
Shaping the sound we hear, and maybe even how female voices were expected to sound. The double standard and pitch accuracy expectations was mentioned too.
And this concept of ethnoforgery.
Right, where racialized traits are put into avatars or sounds by people outside that community.
The example given was using the voice or style of, say, a black male blues singer from the 1930s by AI companies today. It prompts questions about motivation, about appropriation.
It's clearly not just a technical issue, it's deeply cultural and political.
Absolutely. And appropriation is always difficult, but maybe even more so here.
Then the idea of music as a digital commons for AI.
Yeah, but without maybe considering the cost of the resources needed to create that commons, the mineral extraction analogy was used.
Like, we focus on the digital output but ignore the physical requirements.
And contrasting that with a proposal, I think, from Tony Blair's Institute, suggesting copyright law should be ripped up so AI companies can just mine creative works freely.
Wow. That's a strong stance, especially compared to needing specific curated data for beneficial AI like medical research.
Very different approaches. And it brought us back to Jacques Attali.
The canary in the coal mine idea.
Exactly. That ruptures in music often foreshadow bigger societal shifts. What happens here could be a sign of things to come elsewhere.
Which makes these debates feel even more urgent. And it led into how people are reacting, resisting even.
Yeah, this idea of artists actively becoming anti-algorithm, anti-perfection.
Trying to mark their work as human.
Sort of. Deliberately embracing flaws, maybe.
Yeah.
And the examples of school children trying to watermark their art.
To stop AI scraping it.
Yeah. trying to protect their work from being ingested.
That's fascinating. And the lobbying by university
The
students.
University of the Arts of London, yeah.
Yeah.
Second-year students pushing back against a mandatory AI module because of ethical concerns and having no option to opt out.
So the next generation might actually be quite anti-AI in creative fields.
It suggests a potential trend, definitely. There's this feeling of a lack of choice.
Like your work is just being taken, scraped without consent.
Mm-hmm. The lecture drew a parallel to, limited freedoms elsewhere, like voting. Right now, there's often no control over whether your creative output gets fed into an AI.
But it also mentioned that these attitudes might be cyclical. Different student groups might feel differently over time.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a fixed stance, but the core ethical concerns, especially around things like racialized tropes being repeated and amplified by AI, they're really hard to grasp fully.
It circles back to that core thorny question. What counts as ethical use here?
Exactly. Which then moved the discussion towards efficiency, AI and efficiency in the arts.
Ah, yes. The promise that AI will make everything quicker, easier, more creative.
But the lecture really pushed back on that, questioned what efficient actually means in an artistic context.
Yep. Especially when you have figures like Daniel Ek from Spotify apparently wanting creators to just produce more, faster.
Right. Contrasting that push for productivity with the traditional, often long time frames for creating albums, for instance.
And Spotify itself is apparently struggling with a flood of AI music.
That was mentioned, yeah. A huge volume of machine-generated tracks hitting the platform.
So does that efficiency risk devaluing art, making it less precious if it can be generated so easily and endlessly?
That's the concern, which brought in that really interesting story about hip-hop and Nielsen SoundScan.
Right, how changing the way charts were measured actually helped hip-hop break through.
Because the old subjective system was kind of clogged up, SoundScan used point-of-sale data, actual sale.
And it showed what people were really buying.
Yeah, and it led to splitting the charts, catalog music versus new releases. And that gave genres like hip-hop space to grow.
Which prompted the idea of maybe an AI chart.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
A way to give listeners transparency and choice. Do you want human-made, AI-made, or don't you care?
Makes sense. And this tied into chart manipulation generally.
Oh, yeah. Buying your own albums, using bots, dedicated fan armies like the Bayhive or BTS Army mobilizing.
All trying to boost streaming numbers.
Because the revenue per stream is so incredibly low, you need millions, billions of streams to make even a minimum wage.
Creating intense pressure and performance targets.
Absolutely. And artists often carry significant debt from advances. Plus, labels now make most of their money from catalog older music.
So the incentives are complex, and manipulation isn't new, the Rolling Stones example.
Right, their manager getting fan club members to buy records strategically way back when. Manipulation has always existed.
But the scale is different now.
Hugely different in the digital streaming economy. It's just much easier and maybe more necessary to play the numbers game.
Okay. So shifting gears slightly, what about accessibility? Could AI help marginalized artists?
That's a really key question the lecture addressed. Could AI level the playing field for, say, artists with disabilities?
People with ideas, but perhaps physical limitations.
Exactly. In theory, AI could allow someone with limited mobility to express complex musical ideas.
But does the theory match reality?
Well, the example given was a one-armed trap artist using vocals and modular synths,
Okay.
and it highlighted the ergonomic challenges they faced. Most music tech just isn't designed with diverse physical abilities in mind. It assumes a certain normal user.
So the tools themselves can be barriers.
They can be. And the counter-argument raised was, even if AI tools become accessible, is the industry structured to support these new creative pathways? Probably not currently.
What about the deaf music producer example?
Yeah, working with bass responses, haptics, feeling the music visualizers, but constantly getting told by the mainstream industry to just use your ears.
Which is completely unhelpful and exclusionary.
Totally. It forces communities to create their own spaces, like Def Rave was mentioned.
Right. But AI could potentially offer some tools here, like AI mixing.
Potentially. MixCheck Studio from Queen Mary University was mentioned as an AI tool that could help identify audio issues, which might be useful for producers with hearing differences.
So some potential benefits, but against a backdrop of historical exclusion.
Definitely. Which brings us back again to that core question.
Does it matter if we know it's AI?
Yeah. Is it important to know? The analogy used was Kendo Nagasaki, the wrestler.
Ah, the masked wrestler. You didn't know who was under the mask.
Right. But did it spoil the entertainment? Probably not. It was part of the brand.
So is the human versus machine distinction just branding?
That's one way to look at it. And the lecture questioned if all cultures even care about the human origin of art in the same way. The Western economic link seems quite strong.
There was that student comment mentioned, fearless eel.
Pointing out that AI art still has human agency behind it.
Yeah.
Someone prompted it, curated it, and that maybe human-made art connects differently, emotionally.
And it touched on the original goal of AI research back in 1955.
Yeah, creating a thinking machine, mimicking the brain. The question still hangs. Does current AI actually think?
A big philosophical question, and the copyright angle came up again with Francis Gurry.
From WIPO, yeah. Posing the question, if you train an AI on a producer's entire catalog, is that infringement?
What was the distinction made? Ingestion versus extraction?
Right. Ingesting the work might not technically be making a copy in the legal sense, but extracting meaning from it, turning it into data that the AI uses, that's different.
And storing the ingested work itself would likely be infringement?
Probably, yeah. Because copyright restricts making reproductions in different forms. The idea of the mechanical work in music publishing.
Like remixes or using a song in a movie trailer, you need permission for those new forms.
Exactly. Rights holders control adaptations. So AI creating something based on ingested work raises huge copyright questions.
And even if it ingests it, does the AI truly understand it?
Another massive question, which leads to maybe the most direct question of all.
Why do artists need AI anyway?
Right. Technology is often framed as extending human capability, but artists often push their internal limits, their own skills and vision.
Is AI just a tool or something else? The voice enhancement tech example was interesting.
Yeah, the idea that it could create artists who literally can't perform live without it.
Which would redefine entertainment, maybe more spectacle, less raw vocal talent, like the shift from silent films shown in Singing in the Rain.
Could be. AI might push the artist role further towards being an advertiser artist.
And voice transformation isn't new tech, right? The vocoder.
Exactly. Developed for secure communication, then adopted by musicians. You have the carrier signal, the modulator signal.
Humans have been messing with voices for ages.
So is AI voice tech just another step? Is the current panic temporary? The resurrection of dead pop stars' voices in Korea taps into nostalgia.
But maybe the scale is the issue now. Mass production leading to AI slop.
That seems to be a major concern. Not individual enhancements, but the potential flood. What does AI bring that we actually need? Does the world need an AI replication of Prince? Probably not.
But it could enable people with imagination but no traditional skills.
It could. They could become artists in this new paradigm, but that requires a broader acceptance of what art and artist mean.
Which connects to the final really critical point made, the lack of understanding of creativity itself in AI development.
Yeah, Selma Griswold's observation. Computer science students coding AI for creative tasks. They're not taught what creativity is.
So how can you code for something you haven't defined?
You can't, really. AI's creativity comes from pattern matching on vast data sets of human creativity. It hopes the output looks creative to us.
But there's no underlying understanding.
Nope. AI can't claim absolute creativity because there's no definition coded in.
Yeah.
And creativity itself isn't stable.
It varies culturally.
Yeah.
Western originality versus Japanese mastery through replication.
Right. And these diverse models aren't coded into AI either. It operates on a generic, data-driven model, assuming all potential creations are just waiting to be extracted from the data.
Which led to the artist's perspective, comparing AI Ghibli-style images to human artists working in that style.
Some artists use AI as a tool and admit the output quality is similar.
But there was the counter-argument. Some AI proponents claim the years training the AI equals human dedication.
Yeah, but that was contrasted with the anecdote about the Miyazaki animator.
Taking a year for 4 seconds of animation.
Yeah. Emphasizing the time, the dedication, the love invested. The feeling from that perspective is that AI generation just can't replicate that value, that dedication.
So wrapping this all up, it's clear this relationship between AI and the arts is incredibly complex, so many layers.
Absolutely. We've gone from augmentation versus alienation, machine versus human creativity.
Efficiency versus artistic value, accessibility versus ethics. It's a lot.
And perceptions of creativity are shifting. You see resistance emerging. It's all in flux.
It really is. So to leave our listeners with something to chew on, given everything we've discussed, all these rapid changes, what fundamental aspects of human creativity, of artistic value, What do you, the listener, think are most essential to preserve and protect as AI continues to weave itself into these fields?
That's the big question, isn't it? Definitely something worth reflecting on.